Thanks for joining us. I'm Nancy Furness, and this is We've Got Issues. We're filming on site at Coquitlam City Centre Library, and we thank the library for providing the space for us to carry out interviews. I also want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of Coquitlam First Nation. We thank the Coquitlam people who continue to live on the lands and to care for the lands and the waters and all that lies above and below. Today I'm joined by Geoff Scott, who is the former Executive Director of Tri-Cities Community Television. So thanks for joining us today, Geoff.
Thanks for having me.
Now, this is the second in our series on community television, and in our first episode, we talked about this pretty amazing network of community programming offices that were sort of dispersed across the Lower Mainland. Can you talk to us a little bit about what happened to those offices?
Oh, absolutely. Rogers was the organization that had initially put this network together. And then in the late 90s, along came Shaw that bought out Rogers. There was actually a swap of holdings, so Rogers gave up Vancouver and took over some holdings back east. Oh, okay. And at that point, basically, then Shaw had everything in Alberta west, and Rogers had everything eastward. But at that time, Shaw started shutting down the community offices that existed. And to be fair, Rogers was the first to close down an office. In order to make the swap happen, they wanted to cut down a little bit of the money that was being spent on community TV. So they actually closed the office that used to serve the Tri-Cities region. At that point, it was called the Fraser office, and it covered not only the Tri-Cities, but Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge.
And where was that located?
That was located on Kingsway in Poco.
Oh, in Poco.
In Poco,
right,
yes.
Here in Poco. We
right
had
here
our
in Poco.
own. Oh, wow.
There was a big studio and an office that produced programming on everything that was going on in the region. And so that was the very first office to be shut down, and they were, all the volunteers were quite upset, but they were told by Rogers at the time.
Well, that's a big hit to lose your community programming.
Absolutely. It was a big hit for this community, but Rogers at the time said, well, all is not lost. Your volunteers are quite welcome to come to Burnaby and produce the programming there in the facilities they had. But of course, how many volunteers want to jump on a bus or get in a car and drive all the way to Burnaby to produce programming about what's happening in their own neighborhood?
Exactly.
Right? It was a pretty hollow offer, right? It was just an attempt to mitigate the damage that was done by closing the office. And then, of course, throughout the next year and a half, they methodically cut the rest of the offices down. So after this Fraser office was shut down, shortly thereafter the Richmond office was shut down, and then the Burnaby office, and all the little offices that used to exist, like Kitsilano and Van East.
Just slowly but surely they disappeared.
Slowly and surely they all disappeared until, the last office was the Van East office, actually. That was the one that was probably the most political.
Right,
a lot of the volunteers there were very engaged in political issues in their community.
Perhaps they expected a little pushback there.
There was a little more pushback than from some of the other communities that just said, well, that was fun while it lasted, right? The people in the Van East offices said pretty much, no frickin' way you're shutting down our office. They took it over, and at the time, Shaw had just attempted this thing called negative option billing.
Oh, I know.
Do you recall that?
Yes,
yeah, brilliant idea. We're going to bill everybody for your cable service, whether you want it or not, and then you just tell us if you don't. You have to opt out. They just blew up in their face, and anyway, so getting past that, they did not really want to look for another black eye, having suffered that. So they essentially said to the Van East office, you know what, if you are so keen on keeping community TV alive, the office is yours. You have it for a year. The gear you can keep because it's practically garbage anyways at this point. And at the end of the year, you're on your own.
Okay, so we'll transition you out of here.
Exactly. Well, we were still allowed to produce programming, but they were no longer going to pay for the office space.
Oh, okay.
So ICTV was formed. I was one of the founding members. I helped them put everything together. We had a number of...
And ICTV is Independent Community
Sorry,
Television.
yes, ICTV, Independent Community
Okay.
TV. So we were independent of Shaw, and we were producing programming primarily for the downtown east side, and we continued to do so. Even though Shaw had basically shut the channel to all other volunteers, they allowed this one organization to continue to exist.
Can you talk a little bit about the kind of programming that was going on there and what it meant to the community?
Absolutely. So ICTV had a number of members. One of the probably most well-known in the community, Sid Tan, had produced Chinatown Today.
Oh,
But
okay.
he was also one of the key people who fought for reparations for the Chinese head tax.
Oh, interesting.
And he was a very strong speaker, very motivated, and achieved a lot for his community and our community. So he produced programming there. Padro Mora produced a show called Global Justice, which is essentially various, he would cover speakers at various events that were speaking to injustice around the world and in Canada.
All
of
valuable
course.
stuff, right?
Very valuable stuff. Patrice Leslie and Don Walchuk produced a show called After Hours, which was sort of interviewing with all sorts of people. It was sort of much like your We Have Issues show. It was sort of a half hour talking with various people in the community.
Giving a
about-
voice to
Giving a voice to
community
the community.
members.
And then I myself, I produced a magazine show called East Side Story. So that is
Okay.
where we brought all the new volunteers in, provided them training, and they would go out and I would go out with them producing very little stories about, coverage of community events, festivals, things like that.
Important to the community and things that wouldn't necessarily be covered by a larger, more regional news station, right?
Exactly, the kind of things that would kind of fall between the cracks for most media. We would produce little stories and get it out there. So it was a way to kind of keep the ongoing community alive. And,
A little bit of glue.
A little bit of glue, and if anywhere the downtown east side could have used that. So we were happy to provide that for a number of years until Shaw basically shut down the community channel completely.
Right. Now, up until very recently, you've been the executive director of Tri-Cities Community Television. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about?
Certainly. So as we alluded to, I was with ICTV for a number of years in Vancouver, but I lived out here in the Tri-Cities myself and was raising a family. And as I was winding down my production career, because I had worked at Shaw in the 80s, but I'd moved on. I was working at CBC and Knowledge Network, and as a independent producer.
So coming with lots of experience.
Oh, lots of experience, all of which I gained by being involved in community TV in the first place. So this is, again, the reason why I want to see community TV exist for younger people today who
Great
want to build their
opportunities.
skills. Absolutely.
So how was TCCTV formed?
Yes, so as I said, I was winding down my career, working as an independent producer, but I eventually took on the role of head of post-production at Columbia Academy in Vancouver.
Oh.
So this is a school that taught video production.
Right.
Most of the students were international students, but some were from the region as well. And for them, I went to Shaw and I said, well, hey, I know ICTV was given some time. Can I deliver programming that I produce with my students?
Oh, what a great idea.
So being that, they had known me in the past and
Right.
they could rely that I was going to deliver broadcast
It's all about
quality programming.
relationships.
It's all about building relationships. I had a fairly good rapport with them. And so they said, sure, if you want to deliver programming done with your students, we'll find some airspace for it.
Right.
So then Tri-Cities Community TV was formed. It was only on paper. Well, not even on paper. It was in the ether. We
Right.
just produced programming and we called it Tri-Cities
So
Community
it kind
TV.
of just came together.
Just came together. And then years later, we actually formed a society because when I was out here shooting stories with my students, people would invariably come up to me and say, who are you? What's going on here? And when I explain what I'm doing, quite often I'd have people say, well, I used to volunteer at the office on Kingsway, and can I get involved? And eventually, as I moved on from teaching at Columbia Academy, I just wound up picking up with the people in the Tri-Cities that wanted to keep community TV going. So
Just
that's
almost seemed like a natural progression there.
more or less, yes.
So we'll talk a little bit more about the early days of Tri-Cities Community Television in our next episode. And gratitude to you from the whole community. We hear it all the time about how people are grateful to have Tri-Cities Community Television there. You've recorded a lot of history and a lot of the heart of this community. So thanks for all the good work that you have done and that you continue to do.
Happy to do so. As I said, I mean, this is the way I got into my career that lasted quite a long time, and I would like to see that the youth today have the same benefit that I had.
Yeah, some great opportunities. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nancy Furness. This is We've Got Issues, and I've been speaking with Geoff Scott, the former Executive Director of Tri-Cities Community Television.